Everyone, hi.
Hey, hey, hi.
Hi. Hi, Xenia.
Good
Ahora
How
sí,
morning.
are you?
Good
estamos en
morning,
vivo.
Hi, how are you?
Xenia.
Fine. How long?
Been a long
Espérenme que
time.
está.
Yes.
Estamos en vivo, Pi.
Okay, let's start.
Alive.
Bom dia a todos. Que prazer, né, estarmos aqui com convidados ilustres. Bom, nós somos o Toy Piano Brasil e a gente começou a fazer esse pequeno barulhinho com a ideia da Késia, né, de tornar um pouco mais popular ou de familiarizar mais, né, o Toy Piano como instrumento. E aí a gente tem angariado aí pessoas que têm nos ajudado, que têm entrado com a gente nas publicações, e esse é o caminho que estamos tentando seguir, né? Para difundir mais esse instrumento e as possibilidades que ele tem, que por acaso é o tema da nossa mesa, né? Piano de brinquedo, possibilidades e desafios. Bom, como convidados nós temos ilustres toy pianistas e compositores Antonietta Loffredo, Karlheinz Essl e Xenia Pestova Bennett. We are grateful for you be here with us. A Késia vai depois traduzir, né, vai falar em inglês essa apresentação. Bom, qual vai ser a estrutura? Nós teremos então 20 minutos para cada um dos nossos convidados falarem sobre os temas deles. E ao final de tudo nós teremos então as perguntas a serem feitas. Quem estiver aqui pelo Zoom e quiser perguntar diretamente pode ficar à vontade. Quem está nos acompanhando pelo YouTube pode fazer a sua pergunta pelo chat e a gente vai fazer. Pode perguntar em português, em espanhol, em inglês, a gente vai tentar traduzir aqui aquilo que for perguntado para que tenhamos a participação de todos. Né? Késia, por favor.
Hey. Hello. So, Toy Piano Brazil. So I'm Késia Decoté, and I have Claudio Thompson with me on Toy Piano Brazil. So we are basically a collective that we set up to promote the toy piano in Brazil and to promote the work of toy pianists and composers for toy piano in Brazil and from Brazil. And we've been like quite active on social media, gathering people and showing works has been really exciting. And this is our first event. And thank you so much, Claudio, for the invitation and for the organizing committee of the International Contemporáneo for having us. It's really, really exciting to be here. And it's such an honor to have with us Antonietta Loffredo, Karlheinz Essl, and Xenia Pestova Bennett to talk to us about the toy piano possibilities and challenges. So this roundtable is going to work like we're going to have 20 minutes of individual presentations from each one of our guests. And after the 3 presentations, we open for questions from the audience and amongst ourselves. So do feel free to, if you are here on Zoom, so do feel free to just like open your mic and ask your questions or like to write in the chat. If you're on YouTube, please do participate through the live chat. We will keep an eye on the questions there. And feel free to ask in Portuguese and in Spanish. We try to help as best as we can. Okay, and here we go. So I will invite our first guest, Antonietta Loffredo. And Antonietta Loffredo is a pianist, toy pianist, and musicologist. She's talking from Italy right now. Thank you so much. And she's a graduate of the Conservatorio dell'Abaco in Italy and of the Conservatoire Niedermeyer in France. She has also conducted studies in a teaching and educational context at the Department of Musicology and Cultural Heritage of Pavia University and earned a Master of Music degree in Musicology from the University of Milan with a thesis on the toy piano. An acclaimed interpreter of the contemporary piano and toy piano repertoire, Antonietta has performed in Europe, in the Middle East, Australia, and New Zealand. Her CDs of newly composed toy piano music include Antarctica, new music for piano and or toy piano, and The Toy Piano Takes the Stage. Her book, entitled The Toy Piano From the Playroom to the Concert Platform, was published by UT Orpheus Edizioni in Bologna, Italy, in 2018. Antonietta's next toy piano performance is on the 19th of December in Como, Italy. And in February, Antonietta is giving a workshop for children about composition for toy piano in Milan, Italy. And also she has a series of toy piano performance already booked throughout the new year in Italy and in Austria. So do take a look at her diary in her website. And now I hand over to Antonietta.
Thanks, Késia. Can you listen? Yes?
Yes.
Can you listen? Okay. Good afternoon from Italy. So, my interest and involvement in the toy piano dates back to 15 years ago. Over these years, it has developed along three main directions: musicological, starting from my master thesis on the toy piano in art music, performative as a pianist, and pedagogical, being a piano teacher in a state middle school with a musical stream. Therefore, having been asked to talk about my activity, today I would like to describe examples taken from projects I carried out in these three main different but complementary fields. That is, musicological, starting from my master thesis on the toy piano in art music, performative as a pianist, and pedagogical, being a piano teacher in a state middle school with a musical stream. My aim is to highlight the toy piano as a concert instrument far from being just a simplified or a diminutive version of a conventional piano. Of course, the toy piano brings with it an unavoidable ambiguity. This is conveyed by its name, and despite having acquired its own dignity on the music scene for over 17 years. Indeed, the definition toy piano conveys two meanings: that of a piano, and consequently a diminished piano, given its size and external shape, and the meaning of toy, therefore a plaything, an object intended for children. I would add, and a little bit playing with words, that we too, as performers, unwittingly contribute to this ambiguity, calling ourselves toy pianists. For example, in Italian, the literal translation is pianista giocattolo, that is a toy that mimics a pianist. I think this is an already compromised basis for making this instrument recognized as a true concert instrument outside the context in which it is already known. Seriously speaking, for this reason, I decided to write a book on the toy piano, an attempt to make this instrument better known to musicologists interested in the history of musical instruments, and also to professional musicians not already acquainted with the toy piano. In this case, I'm referring especially to those who often have a complacent smile when a colleague shows interest in this instrument. In writing this book, I thought that inserting the toy piano into a historical path would help it to acquire a patent of nobility. Short summarizes of each chapter will offer you an overview of the main contents of the book, and they will show a path from the past up to the present day. That is, when after having joined Cage's new musical world of sounds, the toy piano started to acquire the status of an instrument in its own right. At the same time, they will show how many possibilities for further studies in several fields are linked to this instrument. In the first chapter, slide number 1.
Okay. Sorry, Antonia, just a second. I'll start sharing the presentation.
Thank you so much for your help.
Yeah, no problem. I just need to, where is it? It's not recognized. Just a second.
Yeah.
Why it's not coming up? Oh yeah, got it.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Slide number 1.
Yeah.
Voilà. Thanks. In this chapter, characteristics of the instrument, such as material, mechanism, ranges, and acoustical properties of the toy pianos are described, with specific reference to the models with metal rods, which are commonly used in the contemporary classical repertoire. In chapter 2, slide 2, two separated stories Two separated stories are told of two toy pianos because the sound of these instruments is different from the toy piano with metal rods, which is commonly used in contemporary art music. At the same time, they show the versatility of this instrument. The first story is about upright toy pianos with metal strings, which continued to be constructed until about the 1913s. And the second story is about the Xylet, a tiny piano invented by Harold Rhodes for a rehabilitation program through music during the Second World War. This instrument is interesting because today Kawai toy pianos maintain similar characteristics, that is, tubular components instead of metal rods, and are also used in contemporary music, although less so than the toy piano described in the first chapter. Chapter 3, Music Explained, slide number 3, sketches a general overview of the use of toy instruments in the field of European art music, starting from the second half of the 18th century up to the early 20th century. It is worth noting that, despite the fact that the toy piano already existed, we had to wait for the experimental avant-garde of the mid-20th century in order to see it in the music scene like other toy instruments. Chapter 4, slide number 4, describes some antique and always curious keyboard instruments close to the toy piano in relation to dimensions, mechanism, or resounding components. Most features of the instruments described in this chapter were drawn into the making of small pianos for children. For example, there is a clear interest in crystal pianos between the 18th and the 19th century, and this could explain the presence of glass xylophone in toy pianos probably made in the early 19th century. Chapter 5, slide number 5, discusses the story of three toy piano makers who contributed to the instrument spread in the United States and Europe. They are Albert Schoenhardt, to whom the invention of the model toy piano can probably be attributed, Victor Michel, who in France added to the popularity of this instrument, and Egisto Bontempi, the founder in 1937 of the most famous factory of toy instruments in Italy, and who later acquired the Michelson's patent. What they surely could never imagine is that this tiny piano would one day exit the playroom and set foot in the most important concert halls of the world. In chapter 6, similarities and differences with existing piano models on the market are traced, as well as the interest aroused by the toy piano in playful pedagogical and educational fields. And the next chapter describes the modern play community made of composers and performers dedicated to the toy piano. Okay, thanks. This chapter, no, it is the previous one. Okay, This chapter doesn't claim to be exhaustive. Instead, it is an attempt to trace a coherent path from Cage to the present day. This through the activity of composers and performers dedicated to the art of the toy piano. Before conclusions, in Chapter 8, playing practicalities for performer are described. This information is possibly helpful to musicians who approach the instrument for the first time, and are mainly answers to questions I have been asked during my experience as a toy pianist, or that I myself have wondered about when initially decided to play the toy piano. And also the public is often curious. One of the more frequently asked questions at the end of my concerts is whether the instrument I play has been adapted for professional use. And they are really surprised when I say, no, it hasn't. Coming to my activity as a pianist, as I said, my interest in the toy piano dates back 15 years ago, after having already converted to the contemporary piano repertoire about 10 years earlier. I would say that my interest in the toy piano was love at first listen. In fact, it was initially a timbre fascination. What is usually considered imperfect, like the imperfect pitch and the unpredictable overtones, was to me a microcosm of sound that positively disoriented and overwhelmed me. The second aspect that fascinated me was the possibility of looking for new technical and interpretative solutions while playing a keyboard instrument. In fact, I think that playing the toy piano is an exciting and never-ending problem-solving test for adventurous pianists. For those interested in exploring this aspect, colleague Xenia Pestova has discussed it in depth in her enlightening article, Toy Pianos, 4 Tools, Virtuosity and Imagination in a Limited Context. Lastly, to describe a third aspect which fascinated me, I borrowed the concept of a super instrument provided by Maria Caglioppa in her research thesis entitled Beyond the Piano, the Super Instrument. As you can see in this slide, she explores the essence and role of piano or toy piano in a super instrument constellation, as well as a performer's role as a super instrumentalist. She describes the purposes of the super instrument as follows: extending the capabilities of the traditional instruments and by extension the capabilities of the performer in terms of instrumental range, harmony, timbre, or spatial, textural, acoustic, technical, or technological qualities, which allows the concert instrument become an ensemble controlled by a single performer. In this constellation, she comprises pieces written for toy piano, in combination with piano and electronics, for piano, toy piano, and vocal part, in combination with other instruments or keyboard instruments, and so on. All of them controlled by a single player. In slide 7, you can see 2 examples of setting required on the stage when the toy piano becomes a super instrument. So, the concept of super instrument got me thinking, and I checked the repertoire I played over the last few years. What I observed is that a substantial part of it asks the toy piano, and therefore the performer, to interact with other instruments or tools. I'll show you some examples. The first example, slide 8, is Antarctica. It is a project realized in 2013. This was a project that the Australian composer Diana Blom and I had the chance to develop at the Western Sydney University. For this project, musicians from Europe, Australia, and New Zealand were invited to write pieces for toy piano and or piano, inspired by the atmosphere of the Antarctic landscape. Invited composers were free to choose to write for solo piano or solo toy piano, or a combination of them. As a result, just 4 out of 11 composers wrote for solo piano or solo toy piano. Amongst the others, 3 composers wrote for 2 toy pianos, 1 player, and 4 wrote for piano and toy piano, 1 player. And even if, in some cases, in some pieces, it can be argued whether the toy piano or the piano is a super instrument, the fact remains that the concept of supercomposition or super interpreter is linked to the presence of the toy piano on the stage. The second example, slide number 9, is a project entitled New Music for Multiple Keyboards, which took place in Sydney in 2006. I was invited to participate in this project as pianist and toy pianist, and once again, the toy piano, apart from some pieces played in ensembles, appears in pieces for piano and toy piano, or for 2 toy pianos, in both cases played by a solo player, such as in Musica Battuta, double toy piano etude for 1 soloist by Andrea Pestova, and Drawing Fire Waves for piano and toy piano, 1 player by Diana Blom. The last project I show you as a performance is a more recent one. As you can see in slide number 10, in 5 out of 13 pieces included in the project, the toy pianist interacts with other small instruments, and in one case, even with a small tin robot. And while 2 pieces had been previously composed, 3 were commissioned by me, with the request to use the toy piano with other toy instruments or tools. This was to offer a variety of timbres in a CD dedicated to the toy piano. These are just a few examples, of course, but looking in general at the recent production, especially to the increasing repertoire for toy piano and fixed media or live electronics, I wonder if the concept of super instrument represents the turning point for the toy piano to become more and more a key player on the contemporary music scene. I think that this attitude testifies an increasing search to expand the possibilities of the toy piano. Last but not least, the visual effect to one performer interacting with other instruments at the same time contributes to the theatrical aspect of the performance, and we know how this aspect positively affects the audience's experience, especially while listening to contemporary music. The last area of my activity, which involves the toy piano, is the didactic and pedagogical one. In my opinion, operating in the educational field means expanding the future audience with respect to new musical languages and means of musical expression. I tried to put it into practice in several projects dedicated to the contemporary piano repertoire for students in their early stages of piano studies. And I tried to do the same during a 2-day composition workshop dedicated to the toy piano. Slide number 11. This workshop was held in 2019 at the State Middle School where I teach. 8 of my students, aged 11 to 12 years, at the beginning of their piano studies, were invited to compose short piano pieces under the guidance of composer Mercedes Zavala. My role during this workshop was that of facilitator with the piano teacher of the pupils involved and of observer. Indeed, my aim in inviting composer Mercedes Zavala to hold this workshop was to allow pupils to experience the toy piano in a creative way and also to observe how the toy piano was perceived by pupils. What may be interesting for the purposes of the roundtable is what happened at the end of the second day. We invited the participants to give a title to the 2-day experience. During a brainstorming session, some one-sentence titles arose. It is not a toy piano, extraordinary emotion in its small size, even the smallest are important, and finally, it is not a toy. These statements highlighted that the instrument is not a miniature piano, that it can be a means of expression, and that they found symbolic aspects in it. And finally, that it is more than a simple plaything, despite its external shape. So, in a very simple and distinctive way, pupils highlighted the toy piano as a true musical instrument. It is not a toy. Finally, in conclusion, I think there are nowadays many reasons to discuss the toy piano not only as a concert instrument, but above all, as an instrument capable of expanding our musical thinking. Of course, it all depends on how we musicologists, composers, and performers will be able to highlight the possibilities and distinctive features of this small and fascinating instrument. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Antonietta. That was really, really fascinating. And I already have like lots of questions, and I'm sure our listeners have lots of questions. So we're gonna keep it up to the end. So because now I will invite our second guest, Karlheinz Essl. So Karlheinz Essl is an Austrian composer, performer, improviser, media artist, and composition teacher. Karlheinz Essl attended the University of Music and Performing Arts in Vienna, where he studied composition with Friedrich Schercher and electroacoustic music with Dieter Kaufmann. He also studied musicology and art history at the University of Vienna, where he got his doctorate in 1989 with his thesis about Anton Webern. And he was active as a double bassist until 1984, and he played in chamber and experimental jazz ensembles. Karlheinz Essl also served as a composer in residence at the Darmstadt summer courses between 1990 and 94, and completed a commission for IRCAN in Paris in 1993. Between 1995 and 2006, he taught algorithm composition at the Studio for Advanced Music and Media Technology at the Bruckner University in Linz. And since 2007, he is professor of composition for electroacoustic and experimental music at the University of Music and Performing Arts in Vienna. And in 2016, he was a research fellow at the Queensland Conservatory of the Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia. Karlheinz Essl has written more than 10 works for toy piano, and which we can find the music scores and recordings in his website. And in 2013, Karlheinz released the CD Whatever Shall Be, with most of his toy piano music performed by Isabel Ettenauer. You can order the CD also from Karlheinz's website. So now with you, Karlheinz Essl.
Hello, hello. Welcome. I'm speaking here from Austria, from Vienna. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So the first thing I would like to check technically whether share screen is possible. Okay, can I try now? Desktop.
Yes.
So, let me just see. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it visible now here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So just information. There is my website www.essl.at, and there you find a photo, the same photo that you see here, and with a link to my presentation today, which is a sort of abridged. So I will speak mainly about 4 different pieces that I composed for toy piano and my different approaches to the instrument. I came across the toy piano 20 years ago through Isabel Ettenauer, a pianist from Austria, who had a classical piano studies, and she came across the music of John Cage and by this she found his composition Suite for Toy Piano from 1948. And I heard her once playing a concert in 2000 with some toy piano music pieces which have been written for her. And she asked me whether I would be willing to contribute also to build up a new repertoire of this instrument. But I must tell you honestly, in the beginning, I was not so much amused. I really liked the piece of John Cage, but I generally had the feeling that the toy piano pieces that I heard sounded very, very similar. They were all solo pieces, and they were emphasizing this toy, childish aspect of the instrument. And I had the impression, if I would ever write for this instrument, I would treat it as an adult instrument. And so I asked Isabel, please, give me one of your instruments. I have to check it out myself. So I had this instrument in my studio for quite a long time. I was playing a lot on it. I made lots of improvisation. And then I found out something which is very important for me. First, which Antonietta already mentioned, the toy piano is not a toy. And the toy piano is not a piano. It's from the physicality and how it's built, it's more a percussion instrument. And its sound doesn't resemble anything that has to do with piano music. So if I play just a single note on a piano, I hit a key, and I let it ring and listen to it, at least to me, all the music that is written for this wonderful instrument, the real piano, like from Bach to Boulez, is present. But on a toy piano, it's not the case. There is no connection to any history or tradition. So this gives me as a composer a complete freedom to compose something very fresh and new without the burden of a certain tradition. And this is the beginning of my encounter with this instrument. And I will play you now a little excerpt from my first piece that I have written in 2005. Its name is kalimba. The kalimba is an instrument, an African thumb piano, as it is called, and it's always mostly played by 2 or 3 musicians who play in a very specific technique, which creates a sort of interlocking rhythms. So you hear virtual rhythms and sounds that are not played by one instrument. And this inspired me to use electronics, in this case a playback of the toy piano that is played while the instrumentalist is performing the piece, and it's coming from a loudspeaker which is hidden inside the piano. The performance that you see now has been played in 2016 by Xenia Pestova, one of our guests here.
Karlheinz, I think if you cut your microphone, we cannot hear the sound of your video. Yeah, that's okay.
Excuse me.
In fact, I think you have to share your screen and
Well,
enable the box that
is there a sound? Share sound. Sorry, I see it. Yeah. Optimize for video clips. Thank you. So I try it again. Yes. It's not possible on my computer. Could you play it from your machine? I send you the videos.
Yes, I do have your video here.
This would be very helpful. Sorry, I'm working on a different computer and it doesn't have the Zoom audio device installed.
Yeah, no problem. It's right here. Good, we have backup plans. Ooh.
Very good. It was an idea of Antonietta, and I'm very thankful. Yeah.
Great. Yes, it's here. Kalimba.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. We can now stop sharing the screen. Thank you. After this piece, I wrote a couple of other solo pieces for this instrument. And in 2010, I came in contact with an American toy pianist, Phyllis Chen, who is also one of the pioneers in this scene. And she commissioned me to compose a piece which uses just more than the toy piano, but also some little other toy instruments or toy or gadgets. And so I started to explore the ugly parts of the instrument, so to speak. So I opened the lid and made many experiments how to play inside directly on the rods, what can be done on the resonant board with scratching, tapping, and also electronic processing. And this resulted in a piece with the title Whatever Shall Be, which was performed by Phyllis in 2010. Can we play the beginning of the piece? please. Késia, this is the second.
Oh yeah,
Video, second video.
yeah. Do feel free to
What?
tell me when to stop. Okay.
No, it's just a segment of 3 minutes, so don't need to stop. You just play the play. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sorry. What am I sharing? Am I sharing the right piece? No. Sorry.
It's number 2. Whatever shall be.
Yes, got it.
Can you remove the mouse button? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. As opposed to the first piece, Kalimba, it's not a playback, it's live electronics. So there's a computer program which I've written for this piece, and it's operated by the pianist, in this case, Isabelletta Nauer herself. A few years later, I got a commission to write a piece for toy piano in combination with harpsichord, which I found also very interesting. I used a harpsichord with 2 manuals and 2 toy pianos. So I had, so to speak, 4 manuals. And the title of the piece is Viribus Unitis, which is Latin. It means with common strength. So the idea was to combine these 2 instruments, which are completely diverse, a very old traditional keyboard instrument and a toy instrument, if you want. And together they create a hyper instrument, so to speak, in terms of the thesis of Maria Kallheinz, which Antonietta already mentioned. Can we hear this piece? This is also an excerpt of 3 minutes.
Yes. Yeah.
Number 3, Viribus Unitis. There's something wrong?
Sorry, let me try again. I don't know why it stopped sharing. Okay, let me try again. It's just here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thank you. You have seen two different toy pianos. The classical Schönhut, this is the instrument that is also sitting here, and there's this one. This is a Michelson toy piano, which is for me the best sounding instrument ever built. Unfortunately, it's not available because the factory which produced them, it's a French factory, burned down in 1970. So all the instruments that are around are vintage instruments. And I'm very happy that I have one of those precious instruments. And you have also seen on the top of the Schönhut toy piano 2 desk bells, and they are also playing a certain role in the last piece that I will show you now. It's called Underwood. It's a micro concerto for a toy pianist who performs on 2 toy pianos, a Michel Son and the Schönhut. The Schönhut is prepared, so that means I opened the instrument, detached the tone comb, and made some operations so that this instrument doesn't produce normal sounds, so it's more used as a percussion instrument. And then you have an ensemble which is positioned around the soloists and creating a sort of harmonic space around this solo setting. Can we hear the first 3 minutes of this piece, please? Thank you. So this was the last piece of my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
Okay, now Xenia will make her presentation for us. Xenia Pestova Bennett is a performer, researcher, and educator. Her evocative solo debut of premiere recordings for piano, toy piano, and electronics for Nueva label titled Shadow Piano was described as a terrific album of dark pro-by music by the Chicago Reader. Xenia's all compositions are available on D-Trip Records and Taco Hoko. Her full-length album, Atomic Legacies, featuring Ligeti Quartet and Magnetic Resonator Piano. Highlighted in the Bandcamp's Best of Contemporary Classical in 2020, the album was described as boldly conceived and brilliantly realized, a foretaste of things to come. In The Wire. Intoxicating, extraordinarily, early and evocative, melancholic, heart swells, and proper feelings, and a nuclear musical reaction that produces that great irradiated beauty. Xenia's subsequent digital EP, Atonal Electronic Chamber Music for Cats, takes an unexpected turnaround using vintage synthesizers in an exploration of 1990s techno art pop nostalgia. Xenia Pestova Bennett's new album is out now. It features Karlheinz Essl Goldberg-Werk, performed by Xenia on piano and Ed Bennett on electronics. Goldberg-Werk, that means gold mine work, takes Bach Goldenberg variations as a point of departure and offers a fresh perspective. Karlheinz Essl respectfully incorporates stunning electronic interludes with a spatial dimension, moving sound between the piano and the audience. You can buy a limited edition signed CD from Xenia's website. Digital and unsigned copies are also available from the label's Ergodos Bandscape page.
Thank you so much, Claudio. Thank you, Késia, and thank you to the whole committee for organizing this wonderful festival and for inviting us all. It's a real pleasure to be here and to see your lovely faces for those of you who are joining on Zoom, and hello also to everyone who's joining us on YouTube Live as well. So thank you so much for the insightful presentations. It's a real honor to share the floor, as it were, in a virtual setting with Antonietta, whom I have not met in person yet. So it's the first time, and I'm very happy that we make contact. And of course, Karlheinz, whom I know for many, many years. And as Claudio kindly mentioned, Karlheinz and I just released our most recent collaboration, Goldberg-Werk, a new version of Bach's Goldberg Variations. And indeed, as Késia showed, the CD is out in a very elegant, beautiful little minimal eco pack case, very environmentally friendly. And of course, there's also digital download. And I've pasted the link into the chat window on Zoom, but perhaps Claudio or Késia, you could also put that into YouTube for those joining us there. So my presentation is last, and I will try to keep it somewhat on the brief side, because I know we're all tired. Probably people would like a coffee, a coffee break. And also we want to have enough time for questions and chat, which is so important in those settings. I will try to also reflect, perhaps incorporate some short reflections on what I heard so far today, and also offer a personal perspective. So I'm going to share my screen. I do have some slides, but they really are very minimal. So hopefully you can see this. My email address is there as well as my website. So do please feel free to reach out after the presentation if you have a question or a comment or feedback. It would be really lovely to hear from you. So my interest in the toy piano actually came from a little piece called Kalimba by Karlheinz Essl, which we heard some of today already. I discovered this piece shortly after it was written in 2005, toy piano and playback. And when I heard it, I was just struck by, indeed, the sound, as Antonietta said, the timbre of the instrument and the combination with electronic sound, making it something absolutely magical, like nothing I heard before. And I thought immediately, I must play this. I must play this work. What do I need to do to play it? So I started looking for toy pianos. And of course, at the time, I had no idea. And finally, I invested into a Schoenhut baby grand model with an opening lid. Not the one you saw in the video. That one actually does not open, which makes it difficult to do the piece because, of course, original instructions indicate that the tiny loudspeaker is hidden inside the instrument. So the audience don't know where the sound is coming from. It should be a mystery. At the time, I was actually doing my doctorate at McGill University in Montreal in Canada. And I remember asking my supervisor if I could play this piece in one of my recitals that I had to present as part of my degree. And her answer was no. No, you may not. It's not proper. It's not a proper instrument. It's not a proper piano. And the jury, the committee, will not accept it. And this is probably around 2006 or 2007. So fairly recent, and yet we get an idea how conservative institutions can be. So I would also be curious when we chat afterwards to hear from you and perhaps from Antonietta if you also met similar kinds of resistance in your work. I think it's very, very interesting. So after my investment in my first toy piano, I ended up owning many, many more over the years, and also developed an ongoing collaboration with Schoenhut, who were very generous in supporting many recitals all over the world and sponsoring instruments free of charge that were delivered to sometimes very strange and inaccessible locations, including caves, tropical rainforests, and strange loft studios in Canada, USA, UK, Spain, the island of Madeira, Luxembourg, and also Brazil. I'm going to share with you just a few photos of some of these locations. And this is actually one of the main attractions of the instrument for me is portability. This is a major thing, portability. So we can literally play it in a cave. This is a picture from an actual bat cave in Canada where there were some hibernating bats. They didn't seem bothered by the sound of the toy piano. They were very sweetly just sleeping upside down as they do. Here's a little image of my collaboration with tabla player Sean Matevetsky, where I combined toy piano with the Indian harmonium, another traditional portable keyboard instrument. And we commissioned many new works for these combinations and toured around the world as well. Here you have me meditating before performing a keynote presentation for a symposium in Newfoundland, Canada, remotely from my garden in Northern Ireland. And here is a performance in Brazil, actually, at Inhotim in Minas Gerais. So that was a wonderful experience. We also had a group of fantastic improvising musicians and a dancer in that performance, and it was an outdoor performance in sweltering heat. So there's no way I could have done these projects with a regular piano, if you know what I mean. There was just no way to get the piano to these locations. And it enabled me to participate in musical events in a much wider context. So some of the toy piano initiatives that I have instigated over the recent years would include the Schoenhut Concert Artist Roster. So that was an idea that I suggested to the company, and I believe that many of you are mentioned on this roster, and it keeps growing. The 30-second project, which is something that I did in Canada when I started commissioning 30-second compositions from composers all over the world, many of which were for toy piano. My work with the Contemporary Keyboard Society, with harpsichordist Caitlin Clark in Montreal, and also percussionist Fernando Rocha from Belo Horizonte, who's back in Belo Horizonte teaching. I also organized or instigated the World Toy Piano Summit, the very first World Toy Piano Summit, which was in 2012 in Luxembourg at the Philharmonie Luxembourg as part of the Rainy Days Festival. This is when I had an opportunity to work with many eminent toy pianists, including Margaret Langtan, Phyllis Chan and Isabel Ettenauer, who were already mentioned, and also Bernd Wiesemann and Pascal Meyer. And of course, Karlheinz had a piece commissioned for 4 toy pianos and electronics in that festival. And we also featured works of many, many other composers for multiple toy pianos. So I very much hope that perhaps as part of this meeting and this initiative, we can one day organize a second World Toy Piano Summit. That would be really exciting and really fun. I also instigated the London Toy Piano Workshop, which was in 2017. And this is actually where I first met Késia, who attended and came along and ended up performing in the final concert as well, which was a wonderful collaboration and a wonderful experience. And from there also our continued collaboration and friendship grew. And we had many composers involved as well, emerging composers who went on to do great things with the toy piano. So that was really fun. So also to mention maybe a couple of past projects and upcoming projects, if you are interested. My list of recordings for toy piano specifically is not as vast as Antonietta's, but I do have a couple of little toy piano pieces on my debut that Claudio mentioned, which was Shadow Piano on Innova Recordings. This album is quite old now. It features several pieces for piano and toy piano with electronics, live electronics. Of course, the John Cage classic works, including the suite for toy piano and music for amplified toy pianos, is part of my 3-volume collection of the keyboard works with Pascal Meyer on Naxos. There's a tiny little piece by Ifat Sol Zisso, a composer that both myself and Késia play quite a lot of, which was released on a non-classical compilation of works from the pandemic, in the early days of the pandemic. And there's a forthcoming portrait disc of music by composer Eilish Nurian, Irish composer living in Yorkshire, which will contain also 2 really quirky toy piano pieces. So I talked about my fascination with the instrument and the portability of the instrument. And of course, portable instruments are really not new in any way, and we do have quite a rich and varied history. So on this slide, we can see, of course, the medieval organetto and also the ottavino. And in this case, it's a modern replica built by Colin Booth. This is an instrument I would love to get my hands on, but Colin built 8 of them and sold them all. So if you ever come across one somewhere, let me know. They sound absolutely wonderful. And I think there could be fantastic contemporary pieces written for them, also in combination with the toy piano. The interesting connotations with portable instruments that I'm quite curious to hear your thoughts on at the end would be also this idea of associations traditionally of small instruments and intimate instruments with the private sphere and private settings of the home, and by association, the feminine. So this is something that I think is worth thinking about, and we can also consider the positive and negative connotations that come to mind here. Certainly, this the private sphere is something that's interesting, and a quiet instrument that's intimate and delicate and draws the listener in could be a role played by the toy piano, but we also know it can have much more power through amplification, electronics, and indeed this idea of expanding capacities and making it a super instrument, as Antonietta mentioned. So taking a page from period performance practice, as it were, we can also learn from working with original older instruments when we play toy pianos. And in this case, we can think about playing vintage toy pianos. So what Karlheinz mentioned, the Michelson, but of course we can go further back and look at some of the original older Schönhutts. And I can give you a little example. For example, if we look at a picture like this, this is a very old Schönhutt, and we know that with these earlier instruments, we would have had just white keys, right? So no black keys. You can actually see from this picture how black keys are drawn, painted literally in the cracks between the white keys. So interesting concept when you have such extreme limitation. And of course, we know that one of the challenges of the toy piano is the limitation of dynamics, the limitation of the range, the limitation of articulation. In this case, we have extreme limitation. And as Karlheinz mentioned, the John Cage suite for toy piano from 1948 works with these limitations in very, very creative ways. So this is a real classic of our repertoire, originally written for a tiny instrument like this one with only white keys. It's a marvelous example of how you can squeeze absolutely everything creatively and expressively from this little beastie. The challenge comes, of course, when we play the John Cage suite on a modern toy piano, the one that is chromatic, but also has perhaps slightly better action, and most importantly, bigger, wider keys. And the key size on the modern Schönhutts that we looked at earlier are actually not too far off in terms of width from the regular piano. Of course, they're much shorter, but the width is very, very close. There is only maybe, I don't remember exactly, but I think a millimeter or two difference, depending on the model, which means that we can navigate the geography of the keyboard fairly easily. Of course, not too easily, and we still have to adjust, but it's quite interesting. So there are certain passages in, for example, the suite for toy piano. The second movement has these rapid scaling flourishes here and there that come suddenly, that are quite easy to play on a modern toy piano because you can fit your fingers into the keys fast enough. So I don't have a score example for you, but if you do have that piece, or if you want to look it up later, one possibility would be to check the bottom of page 2 of the bottom of page, let me see, bottom of page 1 of the second movement, page 1, second movement. So we have this little kind of a run that goes up. And of course, when you try this on one of the original instruments, there's no way you can possibly do it by playing each key. So you have to do a glissando, which is much simpler. And this realization only came to me after trying it on a piano with no black keys and small, tiny little spaces. And then I realized, of course, that is exactly what John Cage meant, but it must be true. It absolutely must be, even though he did not notate it in that way. It's a diatonic white key glissando. So that's one possibility, something that becomes apparent when you practice on a period instrument. Other challenges are, of course, the fact that we have no dampers, and we really have no control over the resulting resonance. So in that sense, it is also quite close to the sound world of the harpsichord. So we can certainly borrow from some of the psychological preparation and ways of thinking about sound and resonance in this context. Perhaps an even closer analogy would be the inharmonic bells of an instrument like the carillon. So something else to think about. And of course, the action, depending on the model you are playing, tends to be often uneven and difficult to control, also unpredictable. So this can create unexpected pitfalls when you think that you can actually play a keyboard instrument and you sound like you can't play properly. So this is something that's quite interesting. So I have to admit that even though I love the toy piano and I'm fascinated by it, it is a love-hate relationship. There are moments when I really am fed up. I'm absolutely fed up and I think, I just don't want to do this. So I go through big, long periods and phases where I do not play the toy piano. I go back to the piano, I return to my roots, as it were. And then I always come back out of hibernation and I come back. And other aspects that I love about the instrument are, of course, the humor. And I know that Karlheinz mentioned he was not so drawn by the pieces that highlight the childish aspects, as it were, of the instrument. But I find that some works that explore humor can be very, very charming and can also break down barriers between the audience and the performer. And of course, freedom from the weight of tradition, as Karlheinz mentioned. This is very, very important if we would like to place our own stamp on this music and our musical practice and be creative without looking backwards all the time over our shoulder. But also theater. Theater is really important, theatricality. And again, the toy piano, by its very nature of being unusual and unexpected and also small, draws the audience in and creates the possibility of exciting situations that are unusual and colorful. Thinking about limitations and what we can do as keyboard players, how we can learn from them. One thing that comes to mind, and this is something that I talk about in my paper that Antonietta kindly mentioned, which is in the Tempo journal, Toy Piano's Poor Tools, Virtuosity and Imagination in a Limited Context. Learning from these limitations and using them to improve and increase our proficiency as performers, as pianists, to work on our technique, to work on our sound production. And as keyboard players and as musicians, we are, of course, very familiar with taking a difficulty or a challenge, and in order to overcome it, amplifying the difficulty. So, for example, if you have a big leap, you make it even bigger and you practice that, and then you come back to the original and it actually becomes easier. It seems easier. Or we play with our eyes closed when we want to practice something and learn it really well and memorize something. Or we visualize away from the instrument without making any movements or sounds to train and strengthen the neural networks in our brain, and so on. So making a challenge even more challenging. When you return to the original, it becomes easier. And we can certainly take this in the context of the toy piano. It's very hard to play, but can we still be creative, expressive, technically proficient, and delicate, and produce a range of interesting sounds, even though the action is uneven, even though we have a limited range, even though we have limited dynamics, and so on. And once we achieve that, when we go back to another keyboard instrument like the piano, it plays itself. So it should be mandatory training for all pianists to learn to play toy piano. So if you are interested in a more in-depth discussion of toy piano repertoire and some examples of pieces that I play by John Cage, Henk van der Vliet, Erlen Wallen, Karlheinz Essl, Ifatso Zisso, Cleo Montrey, Eilish Nerian, Michael Finnessy, and Ed Bennett. You can watch my lecture for Gresham College in London, which is a very interesting university without students, an exciting concept. And I believe the link has just been pasted, so please have a look and do reach out and let me know what you think. Thank you very much. Let's have questions.
Thank you so much. Wow, I'm here like full of ideas, full of questions. What a really fascinating roundtable conversation. Thank you so much. So and even our friends on YouTube, so Luciane Cardassia, super pianist, Brazilian pianist that is based in Canada right now. She commented, what an amazing meeting. Thank you so much to the organizers and lecturers. I'm already full of ideas. So yeah.
Hello, Luciane.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, and we have a question from Luciane. So shall we start with that? So she's asking Xenia. Xenia, could you talk about the portability of toy pianos As pianists, we are not used to carry our instruments. Could you share some ideas about traveling with our toy pianos? Again, maybe yes, Xenia, but also Karlheinz and Antonietta, of course. You feel free to give your suggestions as well.
I think I would be very happy to hear what our other guests say, because I'm a very bad example. I just either stick a Bennett toy piano into a big suitcase, or I wrap the grand piano with lots of blankets and things and stick it in a box. So I was actually told off by a couple of professional toy pianists, I won't say who they are, who have special bespoke flight cases made for their toy pianos, and I don't have that. So I would love to hear your suggestions. I found the flight case option very expensive, so I haven't gone down that route.
Karlheinz, Antonietta, do you have any ideas about possibility?
Well, I'm not a toy pianist myself, but I know from Isabel that she always travels with a couple of toy pianos around the world, and she has not a flight case, but she uses the original paper box which was used for delivering the Schönert grand piano, and the inside is stuffed with some damping material, and the instrument fits in. And she was traveling with this instrument and other smaller instruments which she could stuff into her luggage on flights around the world.
And you can have a little trolley as well that you
Yes,
pull.
of course. This is obligatory. You need a trolley to carry that around, and another luggage, another suitcase. But with two hands, you can transport, let's say, 4 toy pianos of different sizes.
And I have a flight case for my traditional spinet, and I normally use a suitcase when for my tabletop toy pianos. But I can go to play repertoire for grand piano only where there are a grand piano. Fortunately, I found places where they had baby grand. So
Great, thank you so much. Yes. And any other questions from the audience, from the other participants in the meeting?
I have a question, if I may jump in, for Karlheinz. Karlheinz, your piece, whatever shall be, what can one do with the newer models of Schönert Grand when you open it and you cannot access the inside for safety reasons?
Yeah. Thank you, Xenia, for bringing up this question. This is really an important point. In fact, you have to use a screwdriver to open it. It's possible. And I had to do it several times. And also for the piece Underwood, which also requires an open lid, I played it with a French ensemble Court Circuit, and the pianist of them who never played the toy piano, so he bought this instrument, and then he was completely unhappy that he couldn't play what was necessary inside. So I flew to Paris, and then we spent a couple of days together in his home. And he's very good in screwdriving, so he has all the tools, and I knew what to do, so I could advise him. And then we opened the instrument and made a sort of reconstruction, and then it's possible to get inside this instrument.
Thank you. And may I ask one question?
And you also have to use a saw in order to cut off a piece of wood that is covering the rods, in order to prevent little toddlers to hurt her little fingers on these metal strings.
Or poke their eyes out.
Whatever.
May I ask Antonietta as well a question, actually? While I'm here, and then I'll shut up, I promise. But Antonietta, have you encountered any pushback or resistance from the more traditional or traditionally minded colleagues about the toy piano? Would you like to share anything?
Yes, of course. It happened. And as I said in my presentation, usually colleagues have a complacent smile when I speak about the toy piano. And moreover, sometimes your programs are accepted, but you have to explain that they are not concerts for children. And so there is this ambiguity, and as you said, push back, and we have to work with it, with this. Thanks for your question.
May I say something?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, okay. Hello. Thank you very much for your presentations. Very, very interesting. I'm based in Berlin. I have many questions. The first one is, you know, Stefan Schleiermacher?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Once I've been in one of his concerts, and he took this toy piano, and that was my first contact with that. But at first, thank you very much for your presentations, because it's so amazing and so interesting to have, for me now, this wider look at the toy piano and your compositions, Karlheinz. Bravo, that's so interesting. Also the combination with the harpsichord, you know, that's really very interesting. And well, all what I got also yesterday from you, Katja, yes. So I think I'm getting to be a big fan of toy piano from now, from these encounters, and just to know about the construction of a toy piano. Can you recommend some, what to say, firma who make pianos, toy pianos, and how much does it cost? Yeah, fabricant, no, Karlheinz. Yeah.
Well, the most common instrument is by the company Schönhut.
Schönhut. Is der Österreicher?
He's German. He's from Göppingen, and he lived in the 19th century. So he immigrated to the US, to Florida, and founded a firm for toy pianos, which is run until now. Unfortunately, these instruments are not available on the European market. So you have to order them from the US. The price of the instrument is not very high. So the grand piano, the baby grand with 3 octaves, is maybe around $300 or euros. But the shipping costs are very high. So it's recommended that you buy several instruments for yourself or others, and then you have only one shipping cost.
But there's no available. There's nothing available in Europe.
I don't know the situation right at the moment, but you can find them sometimes on eBay.
Okay.
Instruments, but as far as I know, there is no company that sells toy pianos in Europe.
Company that's built, yeah. Okay.
But
and the normal toy piano is 2 octaves or 3 octaves?
No, there are 2 different sizes, but maybe our ladies can speak about that. Maybe the Antonietta can tell about this. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, there are many models, several models of toy piano. There are 2 octaves, 3 octaves, but there are also baby grand with 13 keys. For example, in Europe, I think, yes, it is European, Villac. is a company in France who built toy piano, baby grand with 13 keys from Do to Fa. From C to F. And yes, there are something, but you can't find a baby grand in Europe with 37 keys. It is difficult. I don't know any factory in Europe. Indeed. So you have to purchase it on the web.
Oh, it's really, really so amazing. We could be here like all afternoon long, but I'm kind of just worried we're going a bit over time. So we have time for 2 questions that are already here on the queue. So shall we start with the question from Ana Claudia? Can you talk a little bit about the receptivity from the public? So who'd like to start? And then we can go around different experience very quickly.
Is this a general question about toy piano performance?
Yes. Talk a little bit about the receptivity from the public. Yeah, yes, about the toy piano. Oh, Ana Claudia, you're here. You should like to just clarify.
Yeah, for me, it's always, I think, very well received. And as I mentioned, it tends to break down any barriers that we might have. Traditional barriers, division between performer and audience, the kind of esteemed classical music, very serious approach, because it's such a ridiculous thing. And I think people feel more relaxed and free also to chat afterwards and offer feedback. That's my experience. Maybe somebody else has something else to add.
What I can say in my personal experience is that the audience, I think that it is one of the most important things, is that the audience listens to contemporary music and shows a completely different attitude to this kind of music than it is usually observed. I found this in my experience.
And
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And this question goes to Karlheinz, related to Xenia, like about, so Gerardo is asking if he could talk anything about your Bach's records. That's not on the toy piano, but I think it fits so well with this idea of the hyper instruments, like exploring other possibilities in this keyboard world, and also kind of playing around with tradition, isn't it? We talk about like moving from tradition, being free from the weight. But then with the harpsichord, I had this feeling of like, oh, going back and dialogue with tradition. And now we have Bach, Goldberg's variations. Let's go back. Karlheinz?
May I transfer this question to Xenia?
Sure, I'm conscious of time, and I pasted in the chat on Zoom a link which gives you information on our collaboration on Karlheinz's Goldberg work, and you can read in detail on his website. It's really fantastic. So please paste it in the YouTube chat as well for anyone interested. And we would love to hear your feedback on this, because we are doing something quite radical by taking a beloved piece of standard repertoire, the Goldberg Variations, and inserting live electronic interludes. So I would be very curious about reactions and feedback on that. So please do check it out. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry, we have a very interesting question from Luciani, but we are way over time. So I'll leave it here for you on the chat of Zoom. So if you can think about, and maybe like if you have time to go on the YouTube video and then to carry on this conversation with Luciani, it's really, really great. Could the toy piano be a way to reach more audience to contemporary music, people who would not necessarily come to listen to new piano music? People seem always intrigued. So the conversation carries on. But we'd like to thank you so much to our amazing guests, Antonietta Loffredo, Karlheinz, Essl, Xenia, Pestova, Bennett, all over from Italy, Austria, the UK. And thank you so much, the 6th International Contemporary Piano Meeting, for having us in this amazing meeting, from Ana Claudia, so the organizer, the mentor of this whole meeting, for this invitation. And thank you so much, my partner, super friend, Claudio Thompson. We are there on Toy Piano Brazil, steering up the conversation about the toy piano in Brazil. So please check out our pages on Instagram, Facebook. Soon we have our own website, and to carry on the toy piano in this adventure into our tropical land as well.
Thank you very much. I hope see you the next edition of our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great to see you all. Antonietta, bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Késia,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Xenia.